कमरे से बाहर निकले।
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives at the site of a shooting in northern Jerusalem that kills at least 6 and seriously wounds 7 others. Police say 2 gunmen opened fire at a bus before being neutralized as ambulance crews rush victims to hospitals. Spain says it strongly rejects Israel's accusations of anti-Semitism after Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced 9 measures against Israel over the war in Gaza. Madrid condemns Israel's entry ban on 2 Spanish ministers and vows it will not be intimidated in defending peace and human rights. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warns Hamas to release hostages and lay down arms or face the destruction of Gaza and its own annihilation. His message comes minutes after the President Donald Trump issues what he calls a last warning to Hamas. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi says talks with Iran on fully resuming inspections have made progress, but time is running out. He tells the IAEA Board of Governors he hopes the discussions can be successful and concluded within days. South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun travels to the United States to address the fallout from the mass arrest of Korean workers in Georgia. Seoul says a deal has been reached to free about 300 detainees from a Hyundai LG battery plant, with plans to fly them home this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he supports US tariffs on countries continuing trade with Russia, calling the idea right in an interview with ABC News. His comments come as Prime Minister Narendra Modi attends a summit in China alongside Vladimir Putin, while the Trump administration prepares new sanctions. At least 14 people are killed and dozens are injured in Nepal as Generation Z-led protests against a social media ban erupt into clashes with police in Kathmandu. Authorities defend the crackdown, saying the ban on Facebook, X and YouTube is needed to combat fake news, hate speech and fraud. An Australian woman, Erin Patterson, is jailed for life with a 33-year minimum for murdering 3 relatives and trying to kill another with a toxic mushroom meal. The judge calls the 2023 poisonings the worst category of crime, noting her elaborate cover-up and failed attempts to poison her husband. Now for our top story, we head to the Middle East, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to press on with the nation's missions despite the growing violence in the region. Speaking at the site of a deadly attack in East Jerusalem and speaking to the press, the Israeli Prime Minister has stated the following.
נרדף וכיתור של הכפרים שמהם באו המרצחים, ואנחנו נשיג את כל מי שסייע באדם, וכל מי ששילח אותם, ואנחנו ננקוט בצעדים קשים עוד יותר. הרציחות הללו, הפיגועים הללו, בכל הגזרות, הם לא מרפים את ידינו. הם רק מגדילים את הנחישות שלנו, להשלים את המשימות שלקחנו על עצמנו. גם בעזה, גם ביהודה ושומרון, בכל מקום. אנחנו נלחמים בטרור, במשטר הטרור של החות'ים, באיראן שמגבה את כולם, בעזה, בלבנון, בחיזבאללה, בכל הגזרות. אנחנו לא מרפים וגם לא נרפה. אנחנו נעצים את הפעולות שלנו ואנחנו נשיג את כל המטרות שלנו.
Meanwhile, the European Union has also spoken on the attack. Anor Al-Anoui, the EU spokesperson, has condemned the shooting. Let's listen to him.
We condemn this attack as we condemn all loss of lives, which actually must stop now. We call for de-escalation, and this shows how necessary and critical a ceasefire is. Civilians on both sides, both Palestinians and Israelis, have suffered for far too long and far too much, and this must end now, and it is high time to break this cycle of violence.
We're now joined by Ali Mohammed Abushbak. He is an independent Palestinian researcher and he joins us live from Cairo in Egypt. Ali, thank you for speaking to us as always. Ali, we heard the EU spokesperson there linking this attack to the ongoing situation in Gaza. Do you think he's correct to do so?
Thank you, Thomas. The thing is, the situation on the ground is escalated and it's out of the control, especially this attack. It's forming as a slap for Benjamin Netanyahu and his national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. So among of the victims and casualties in this attack, two Israeli rabbi, that the Jewish scholar that's make it more incredible, the situation with the Palestinian civilians, Palestinian and Israeli settler. The attacker used Carlo gun and one gun, it's a personal. So the thing is more escalated. As I mentioned before, it will spark a several of series of these things until and unless Benjamin Netanyahu will not stop and halt the war in Gaza. I guess the condemnation by European Union, I guess we are normalized and tolerated to hear such kind of statement and biasness with Israel. Last time when the Israel targeting on live stream journalist in Nasser hospital in Gaza, we didn't hear such kind of statement. So I guess it will exacerbate the situation. But in my opinion, also Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to accept the ceasefire with Gaza until for his personal benefits. And I guess now the Israeli community divided against the Israeli operation in Gaza and the militant operation in Gaza. Yesterday night, it was a mass protest in Tel Aviv. Yes, Thomas.
Apologies. I was just wondering, how do you think the Israeli public is going to react to this? Do you think there is going to be more anger and more cause to push on with the war? Or do you think that the Israeli public might think that this war puts themselves at further risks of attacks like this?
This will increase the violence on the ground between Arab nation, Palestinian, and the Israeli settler who want to take the revenge and retaliation from the Palestinian. We have seen several of Israeli settler attack the Palestinians village and attacking Palestinian civilians. And this is also, as we mentioned yesterday, there is a permission and around 200,000 Israeli settler who has a gun now and has a permission to hold a gun. So that will increase the violence on the ground between Palestinian and Israel. And I said if it will not closure this chapter immediately, according and will not applying the Security Council for United Nations May 2025, when they are asking for immediately ceasefire in Gaza, if Israel will not accept and adhere to this resolution, that will, escalate the violence on the ground between Palestinian inside Israel and Palestinian in West Bank. No doubt about desperate civilians in Gaza and the Palestinian resistance on the ground. So the violence circle, it will escalate more and more and will be like a snowball if will not hold it and if will not Benjamin Netanyahu accept also the demand of the Israeli protester who are asking to stop the war.
Ali, do stay with us. We have further updates from the region and over to diplomacy now, where Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has announced that Israel has accepted a US ceasefire proposal to end the war in Gaza. Speaking in Budapest, Saar said the deal would require the release of hostages and Hamas to lay down its arms. Let's listen in.
President Trump said it clearly yesterday. Israel said yes to his proposal. We are ready to accept a full deal that would end the war based on the cabinet decision. Two things must happen. One, the return of our hostages. We still have 48 hostages kidnapped from their homes on October 7th being held in Gaza today. Second thing, Hamas must lay down its arms. Immediately after landing in Budapest, I received terrible news from our country. This morning, there was a horrific terror attack in our capital, Jerusalem. 2 Palestinian terrorists murdered Jews on buses at the remote junction in the entrance to Jerusalem. So far, 6 Israelis have been killed. There are many, many injured, including pregnant women.
US President Donald Trump has earlier warned Hamas, calling his message a last warning and stating that Israel had accepted his terms. We are now once again joined by Ali to discuss this. Ali, of course, Israel have accepted this deal. Hamas has said it will release all the hostages previously. However, what is most in contention here is that if it will lay down its arms. Do you think it's likely do you think there's any likely movement on this deal? Do you think Hamas will agree to these conditions?
First of all, the proposal that put it by Donald Trump about release the whole hostages, either they are alive or the remain body of them in one time, and then after that going for a temporary truce between Hamas and Israel, and also continue the negotiation. I guess Hamas is not going to accept this deal because the only supporting card with Hamas, the powerful card, is the hostages. If the Hamas release the hostages, I guess this is the mentality of Hamas. There is no guarantee that Israel will not resume the war like what we have seen in the mid of March 2025. Suddenly Israel resumed the war without any warning, without any excuses. So also about lie down the weapon, I guess Hamas is not going to accept it at all. We have seen, as an example, Hezbollah, after the truce and the ceasefire with Israel, and now it's going after 4 months, it's going to complete 1 year. Hezbollah is not going to lie down its weapon because they consider it as an honor, and they consider it as the one strongest a card for them in case Israel is going to invade South Lebanon. The same mentality with Hamas. And also worth mentioning that, Thomas, what is the weapon? Hamas using AK-47 and using some anti-tank missiles. It doesn't have the arsenal like what we are thinking. So this is just only this term to lie down Hamas, its weapon, this is just to take advance from Benjamin Netanyahu to maintain the war, to maintain his power on the government, to maintain his longevity to ruling Israel for coming election next year. So the things is more complicated. Hamas, in my opinion, if Hamas in case accepted the deal and released the whole captive, there is no guarantee for Israel will not stop the war.
Yes, and now let's move over to Donald Trump. He's issued something that he's called a last warning to Hamas. What do you think of his statements, especially as the US is a mediator in this conflict?
It's always Donald Trump. He's coming on the controversial statement, the last warning, and I'm giving them like was last in the very beginning when he housed the White House. And he said Hamas should be released the whole captive at one time. That in the first deal between Hamas and Israel. And also after that time, he said, at this phase when and during the last year. So but Donald Trump is always with his sarcastic statement and with his sarcastic making some, I don't know, he's just only want to put pressure. And either he's serious or no, what he can do. Palestinians in Gaza desperate. They have nothing to lose more than. Hamas has nothing lose to more than. So all the Hamas leader, the first line of Hamas, the supreme leader of Hamas, and also the commander of Hamas have been assassinated during the war. Hamas has nothing except the hostages. So what it will happen? Also worth mentioning, during the Israeli-American soldier, when Hamas released it with no deal, with no, with no negotiation, deal it with, release him without exchange the Palestinian prisoner to show their good intents with regard, Donald Trump. Hamas take nothing.
Yes.
There is no obtain of these things. So I guess Hamas take a hard lesson from releasing Al-Iskandar, the American-Israeli soldiers. So now the situation will be more complicated. On the ground, only civilians casualties. Palestinian on the ground lambasting Hamas. They are asking to accept the deal at any cost, with anything. They just want to, end the war.
Yes.
You can't imagine the people when they are desperate from their home, displaced from their home. And it's a very difficult notion.
Yes, Ali
Thomas.
Mohammed Abushbak, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to speak to you as always. We now move over to Europe, where according to the Russian Defence Ministry, Russian forces struck Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Ukrainian officials confirmed damage to a thermal power plant in the Kiev region, causing blackouts and interrupting gas supplies for over 8,000 homes. Ukraine reported that Russia launched 810 drones and 13 missiles between Saturday and Sunday, targeting energy facilities, military bases and logistical hubs. In Kiev, drone debris struck residential buildings, including a 9-story apartment block, killing at least 2 people and an infant, while a main government building also sustained damage. Additional strikes caused damage across multiple regions, including Zaporozhye, Kyiv, Odessa, Sumy and Chernihiv. Russian attacks on Kiev's energy infrastructure have been escalated since the 2022 invasion, intensifying as winter approaches. We're now joined by our guest, Andrew Latham. He is a professor of international relations and he joins us live from Minnesota. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us here on NewsX World. Obviously, we saw a huge aerial attack from Moscow yesterday, Andrew, claiming to hit mainly energy infrastructure and military buildings in the Ukrainian capital and in other and various cities and areas of Ukraine. What are your thoughts on Russia's escalating aerial barrage on Ukrainian territory, especially with the backdrop of these diplomatic efforts to end the war?
Well, at one level, it's not surprising at all. Pardon me. It is in the nature of this kind of war that you see a strategic dimension. And by that, I mean that both sides are attacking logistical hubs behind the lines. They are attacking roads and bridges. They are attacking oil infrastructure. And that's meant to undermine the ability of frontline forces to resist the other side. So that's not unusual. That's in the European experience, that's World War II. In the American experience, that's certainly the Korean War and Vietnam and Iraq. And it's the nature of war. Now, that being said, we can put it in a context. Russian strategy vis-a-vis Ukraine has been, as winter approaches, and now this is several winters have approached, to try to freeze Ukraine out of this war by undercutting its ability not only to manufacture goods, which requires energy, but also to heat homes, which requires energy. And so every fall we see this ramping up of the attacks on the energy infrastructure, not surprising. I don't think that President Putin is interested in a ceasefire unless all of his core concerns are addressed. And they're not going to be addressed because they are, I was going to say outrageously, but let's just say exorbitantly extreme. And there's no way in which President Zelensky can concede these. So there's no incentive really on the Russian side for a ceasefire, and certainly not for any kind of permanent peace along the lines that have been suggested by President Trump and accepted by President Zelensky. That's not going to happen. So what's the option? The option is to prosecute the war on the ground ever more fully, and that means prosecuting the war behind the lines ever more fully. And so really none of this is surprising, and none of the diplomatic noises coming out of Washington or Kyiv are going to make any difference at all.
Yes, and Andrew, you mentioned there that these strikes aimed at energy infrastructure and logistical hubs could be aimed at weaponizing the winter months that are approaching. How much of a serious aspect is this? And how much of an effect does this seasonal change could it have on the war in just a few months' time?
Well, literally and metaphorically, the front lines are going to freeze in place, at least, well, during the fall when there's so much mud and muck and it's very difficult to conduct military operations along the front lines. So there's likely to be something of not quite a hiatus, but the dial will be turned down a little bit. But that doesn't apply to the behind-the-lines long-range strikes by either side. In fact, they have an incentive to ramp that up. The Russians, in order to undermine the production and home heating side of things, which undermines morale and the capacity to fight and makes perfect rational sense. And on the Ukrainian side, it's about embarrassing Russia, but also about, to the extent possible, galvanizing domestic opposition to the war in Russia by making it uncomfortable for Russians as well. So we're likely to see the way in which the war is prosecuted. We've seen this over the last few winters as well. It's likely to change, especially in that autumn season. It's easier to conduct ground operations when the ground is frozen, but between now and then, it's going to become increasingly difficult. Again, I think both sides have incentives to conduct these kind of long-range strikes, which they are. They also have incentives to acquire and deploy anti-missile systems. The Russians seem to be having very little difficulty with that. The open question is to what extent the Ukrainians can continue to acquire and deploy the kind of anti-missile systems that they need in order to frustrate the Russian strategy.
Andrew Latham, thank you very much for that analysis and thank you for taking the time. Pleasure having you on the programme. We now move over to South Asia, where anti-corruption and anti-governance protests have spread beyond Kathmandu, reaching cities like Pokhara, Butwal, Chitwan, Nepalgunj and Biratnagar. Nepal's army says 2 to 3 platoons have now been deployed inside the capital at the request of the civilian administration, focusing mainly around the parliament. And now these clashes have seen at least 14 people killed and many others injured over the government's ban on popular social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp. Demonstrators clashed with police outside the parliament, protesting both corruption and the social media shutdown. Authorities say police used tear gas and rubber bullets to control the crowds, and a curfew has been imposed to restore order. The ban was cited as necessary to curb misuse of social media for fake news, hate speech and criminal activity. Let's listen in to what some protesters had to say. We now turn back to Europe, where France is bracing for political upheaval as Prime Minister François Bayrou faces near certain defeat in a confidence vote just 9 months into his job. His controversial €44 billion austerity budget has united opposition parties against his minority government. Bayrou would become the second French Prime Minister ousted in less than a year, further complicating President Emmanuel Macron's efforts to restore order. Listen in to see how MPs have reacted ahead of the confidence vote.
Moi, je suis très heureuse de ce vote de confiance. Pour une fois, depuis 5 ans, nous avons le droit à un moment de démocratie à l'Assemblée nationale. Nous avons essayé de censurer M. Bayrou 8 fois. 8 fois, il avait été sauvé par Mme Le Pen et 6 fois par les socialistes. Et donc, enfin, ce soir, la démocratie parlementaire va pouvoir s'exprimer. Et je crois que c'est avant tout une grande victoire populaire. Parce que si M. Bayrou se soumet à ce vote de confiance, c'est uniquement parce qu'il a peur du 10 septembre. Et donc, c'est uniquement parce que les Français se sont auto-organisés pour mettre en place le mouvement du 10 septembre que M. Bayrou se soumet à ce vote.
Il y a un autre chemin possible, un chemin qui permettrait à notre sens de trouver un compromis au Parlement, et puis une autre méthode de gouvernement, parce que l'utilisation du 49.3, c'est ce qui crée de l'instabilité. Aujourd'hui, les socialistes proposent, s'ils arrivent demain à Matignon, de renoncer au 49.3 et donc de devoir aller chercher, texte par texte, des compromis au Parlement.
Si on enlève ces deux extrêmes, si on les passe à la centrifugeuse démocratique et qu'on se ressente et qu'on ait un mouvement centripète, si on peut faire un peu de science, eh ben, on constate qu'il y a une majorité là. La majorité en fait qui a gagné les élections. C'est qui a gagné les élections au mois de juillet dernier? Le Front républicain. Et donc les Français, ils attendent que ce front républicain travaille ensemble pour proposer des solutions pour leur quotidien et sans doute aussi pour éloigner la France des extrêmes.
Moi, je ne voterai pas la confiance, mais je suis assez d'accord. En revanche, je pense que le vrai sujet le plus grave, c'est que ceux qui nous écoutent ont le sentiment de ne pas avoir été écoutés. Les Français ont voté pour un front républicain et aujourd'hui on a des partis qui refusent le dialogue les uns avec les autres et qui s'acharnent sur leurs ambitions personnelles et leurs ambitions pour 2027. C'est absolument dramatique, ça suppose des concessions réciproques, ça suppose que le Premier ministre aussi ouvre la porte à de réelles discussions, ça suppose de remettre en cause aussi une partie du bilan de ce qui a été fait depuis un certain nombre d'années. Moi je suis très partisan qu'on examine la question des aides économiques qui ont pris des proportions.
French President Macron now faces a tough choice: appoint a 7th Prime Minister or risk snap elections. Meanwhile, public support is plummeting, with 64% of French voters saying he should resign. Tensions are rising ahead of planned nationwide strikes, while Macron eyes possible cooperation with the Socialist Party to break the gridlock. We now move east, where as protests continue, the months-long legal crackdown on Turkey's main opposition CHP party, police have fired pepper spray to disperse demonstrators gathered outside the Istanbul branch of the party. Now, in the latest move against the CHP, a court has ordered the removal of the party's Istanbul provincial head over alleged irregulation in a 2023 Congress and appointed a replacement. As protests continue, police have fired pepper spray at some 200 protesters, including lawmakers. Many of the protesters had been present all night after riot police fanned out the building, setting up barricades in the area ahead of the arrival of the court-appointed replacement. Well, this is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.